They set out to build a tower that would reach the heavens, a tower so tall its top would pierce the sky, raised by the whole of humanity, united, speaking a single language, determined to make a name that would never be forgotten. It was the greatest thing human hands had ever attempted, and it would be brought down not by fire, not by war, but by something no one saw coming. Welcome to Ancient Nights. Every story here is drawn from the ancient world, told in order, from the beginning of time. Most of them straight from the Bible, woven with the real history of their age. Tonight, the story of the Tower of Babel. After the flood, when Noah and his family stepped out onto the new earth, they were given the same words that had been given at the very beginning. Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth. And they did. The generations passed. The children of Noah's sons had children of their own, and those children had children. And slowly, the earth began to fill again with people. The world was repopulated, family by family, tribe by tribe, spreading outward from the mountains where the ark had come to rest. And tonight's story begins in the middle of that spreading, when humanity, still one people, still speaking one language, came together in a single place with a single ambitious idea. The text opens with a line of striking simplicity. It says, "Now the whole earth had one language and the same words." One language, one shared tongue. Every human being on earth able to speak to every other, without barrier, without confusion, without any need for translation. Imagine such a world where a traveler could walk from one end of the earth to the other and be understood everywhere, where no idea was ever lost in translation, where all of humanity was, in the most literal sense, on the same page. It is a picture of profound unity, and unity in itself is not a bad thing. But the story is about to show us what humanity chose to do with that unity. And it is here that things begin to turn. The text says that as people migrated from the east, they came to a plain in a land called Shinar, and they settled there. Shinar. This is one of those moments where the ancient story anchors itself firmly in the real geography of the world. Shinar is the ancient name for the land of Mesopotamia, the great flat plain between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, in what is now Iraq. This is the land, as we have seen in earlier episodes, where human civilization first took root. The land of the first cities, the first writing, the first empires. And it is here, on this wide and fertile plain, that humanity gathered to build. And now the text tells us something remarkable, something that reveals in a single detail just how deeply this story is rooted in the real ancient world. It says, "And they said to one another, 'Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly.' And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar." Listen to that. Brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. This is not a poetic flourish. This is an exact and accurate description of how the peoples of ancient Mesopotamia actually built. Here, let us step gently outside the pages of the Bible and look at the world through the eyes of history. In most of the ancient world, great buildings were made of stone. In Egypt, they had limestone and granite. In Greece and later Rome, marble and cut rock. But Mesopotamia was different. It was a land of flat river plains, rich in mud and clay, but almost entirely without stone. There were no quarries, no mountains of rock to cut. If you wanted to build something great on the plains of Shinar, you could not carve it from stone, because there was no stone to carve. So the peoples of Mesopotamia invented another way. They took the abundant mud of the riverbanks, shaped it into bricks, and baked those bricks hard in the sun or in great ovens until they were strong as fired pottery. and to bind them together they used bitumen, the natural tar that seeped up from the ground in that region, the same substance we spoke of when Noah sealed the ark. Bitumen was the mortar of Mesopotamia, the glue that held the ancient world together. With fired brick and bitumen, the peoples of the plain could build enormous structures, walls, temples, palaces, and towers, without a single block of stone. And this is exactly what the Bible describes. The detail is so precise, so true to the real building methods of ancient Mesopotamia, that it places the story firmly in that world. Whoever first told this story knew that land, knew how its people built, knew the brick and the bitumen of the great river plain. And what did they decide to build? The text says, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. A city and a tower with its top in the heavens." To understand what kind of tower this was, we must again look through the eyes of history. Because the peoples of ancient Mesopotamia did build towers that reached toward the sky, and we know exactly what they looked like. They were called ziggurats. A ziggurat was a massive stepped tower built of the very fired brick and bitumen the Bible describes. It rose in great terraces, one level set upon another, each smaller than the one below, like an enormous staircase climbing toward the heavens. At the very top stood a temple, a shrine to a god. The ziggurat was the meeting place of earth and sky, a mountain made by human hands in a land that had no mountains, built so that the people could climb closer to their gods, and so that the gods might descend to meet them. The ziggurats were among the greatest structures of the ancient world. Their ruins still stand today, scattered across the plains of Iraq. Vast mounds of ancient brick, worn by thousands of years of wind and weather, but still rising above the flat land around them. The most famous of all was the great ziggurat of the city of Babylon itself, a structure the Babylonians called Etemenanki, which meant, in their language, the foundation of heaven and earth. It was said to have risen in 7 great terraces, crowned with a temple to their chief god. Many scholars believe it was this very tower, the ziggurat of Babylon, that inspired the story of the Tower of Babel, and this brings us to the name itself. Babel. The city they were building, the text tells us, was Babel, which is the ancient name for Babylon, one of the greatest cities of the entire ancient world. For thousands of years, Babylon would stand as a center of power, of learning, of wealth and splendor. Its name would echo through history as a symbol of human achievement and also of human pride. The Babylonians themselves believed their city's name meant the Gate of God, Bab-Ilu, the gateway between the human world and the divine. To them, Babylon was the place where heaven and earth met, the very center of the world. But the Bible hears the name differently. In the Hebrew of the story, the name Babel echoes another word, Balal, which means to confuse, to jumble, to mix up. And this play on words points directly to what is about to happen in the story. The city that called itself the Gate of God would become, in the memory of this story, the place of confusion. And it is worth pausing longer on this city, Babylon, for it became one of the most extraordinary places the ancient world ever knew. Long after the time of this story, Babylon would rise to become the capital of a great empire, a city of staggering wealth and splendor on the banks of the Euphrates. Its walls were said to be so wide that chariots could ride along the top of them. Within them stood palaces and temples, markets and gardens. The ancient world spoke of the hanging gardens of Babylon as one of its great wonders, terraces of green cascading down toward the river, a paradise raised up in the middle of the dry plain, though whether they truly existed as described, we still do not fully know. At the center of the city rose the great ziggurat, Etemenanki, the tower we spoke of, dedicated to Marduk, the chief god of Babylon. Ancient records describe it rising in terrace upon terrace, a mountain of brick climbing toward the heavens, with a temple at its summit reached by great staircases. Pilgrims and priests would climb its heights, at its peak, the meeting of earth and sky. For the Babylonians, this was the very center of the cosmos, the place where their god came down to dwell among them. And through the streets below flowed a city of many tongues. For Babylon, at the height of its power, was a place where peoples from across the known world came together. Traders and travelers, captives and kings, speaking dozens of languages, worshipping many gods, mingling in the markets and along the river. It was a city of astonishing achievement, of mathematics and astronomy, of law and literature, of towering ambition made real in brick and bitumen. And it was also, in the memory of the Bible, the very symbol of human pride reaching for the heavens. Both things were true. Babylon was the height of what human beings could build, and in this ancient story, a warning about what that building could become when it was raised for the glory of humanity alone. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let us return to the plain and to the people building their tower and ask the question the story wants us to ask. What exactly was wrong with what they were doing? Let us imagine for a moment what it would have taken to build such a tower, for the labor of it tells us much about the world of this story. To raise a ziggurat was the work of a whole society over many years. First came the making of the bricks, and the numbers are almost beyond imagining. A single great ziggurat required millions upon millions of bricks. Each one had to be shaped by hand from river mud, pressed into a mold, and then either dried in the fierce Mesopotamian sun or baked hard in a kiln. The sun-dried bricks formed the vast inner core of the tower. The harder, kiln-fired bricks, more precious and more durable, formed the outer shell that faced the weather. And between them, layer by layer, the black bitumen was spread, binding the whole structure together and sealing it against the rains. Then came the building, the endless carrying of bricks up the rising terraces, the laying of course upon course, the slow climb of the structure toward the sky, season after season, year after year. It required organization on a scale that only a settled, prosperous, unified society could achieve. It required leaders to plan it, scribes to record it, overseers to direct it, and thousands of laborers to carry it out. The tower was not merely a building. It was a statement of what an entire civilization could accomplish when it bent its whole strength toward a single goal. And this is exactly what the story understands. The Tower of Babel was not the work of a few. It was the work of a united humanity, pooling all its skill and strength and cooperation into one soaring ambition. That is what made it so impressive, and in the eyes of the story, so dangerous. For all that power, all that unity, all that remarkable human capability was being poured into a monument to human pride. Because on the surface, building a city and a tower does not seem like a sin. Humanity had been told to fill the earth, to build, to create, to cultivate the world. Ambition, skill, cooperation, the desire to build something great. These are not evil things. So what was the problem? The answer lies in the reasons they gave. Listen again to their words. Let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. Two things stand out. First, let us make a name for ourselves, and second, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. Consider the first. Let us make a name for ourselves. This was a project built for human glory, a monument to human greatness, a way for humanity to lift itself up, to reach the heavens by its own power, to become great and famous and remembered, not through walking with God as Noah had, but through its own achievement, its own strength, its own towering ambition. The tower was to be a statement. Look what we can do. Look how high we can climb. We need no one above us. We will make our own name and write it across the sky. And consider the second reason, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. This is the quiet heart of the matter, because God had told humanity to fill the earth, to spread, to scatter in the good sense, to bring life and cultivation to every corner of the world. But the builders of Babel wanted the opposite. They wanted to gather in one place, to stay together, to resist the spreading, to hold themselves in a single mighty city rather than filling the earth as they had been told. Their tower was, in part, an act of defiance, a way of staying put, of concentrating their power, of refusing the very future they had been given. Pride and defiance. The desire to make a name for themselves, and the desire to resist the path laid out for them. This is what the story places at the center of the tower. Not building itself, not ambition itself, but ambition turned toward human glory and away from God. A whole civilization, united in language and purpose, turning its collective strength toward lifting itself up to the heavens. And then comes one of the most quietly striking moments in the whole of Scripture. The text says, "And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built." The Lord came down. There is a gentle irony here, and it is surely intended. Humanity built a tower meant to reach the heavens, a tower with its top in the sky, a mighty structure climbing toward the divine. And yet, the text tells us, God had to come down to see it. However high they built, however mighty their tower, it was still so small from the height of heaven that God had to descend even to look at it. All their ambition, all their climbing, all their reaching toward the sky, and still the distance between earth and heaven was infinite. The tallest tower human beings could build did not bring them meaningfully closer to God. It was still, from the perspective of heaven, something you had to stoop to see. It is a humbling image, and it puts the whole ambition of Babel in its place. The builders thought they were storming the heavens. From heaven's side, God came down to look at their little tower on the plain. And what did God decide to do? The text says, "And the Lord said, Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them." This is a fascinating line. God looks at what humanity has become, one people, one language, united in purpose, and recognizes their extraordinary power. Together, unified, speaking one tongue, there was almost nothing they could not do. And that, in this story, is precisely the danger. Not that humanity was weak, but that it was strong in a way that was turning entirely toward pride, toward self-glory, toward building monuments to itself and resisting the path it had been given. And so God acted, not with fire, not with flood, not with destruction of any kind. He acted in a way that was strange and subtle and almost gentle. He said, "Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech." He confused their language. In an instant, the single shared tongue of humanity was shattered into many. Where before every person could understand every other, now they could not. A worker asked for a brick and received something else. An instruction was given and misunderstood. A conversation dissolved into noise. The great unity that had made the tower possible simply came apart, not through violence but through the loss of shared words. Humanity could no longer understand itself, and the building stopped. Of course it stopped. You cannot build a great tower with people who can no longer understand one another. The plans collapsed into confusion. The work fell silent, and the text says that the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. The very thing they had tried to prevent, being scattered over the face of the earth, was exactly what now happened. They had built the tower so that they would not be dispersed, and it was because of the tower that they were dispersed. Their attempt to resist the path laid out for them became the very means by which that path was fulfilled. Humanity spread out across the world, family by family, language by language, filling the earth at last, just as they had been told to do from the beginning. And so, the text tells us, the name of the city was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. Babel, the gate of God, in the eyes of those who built it, the place of confusion in the memory of this story, a monument to human pride that ended not in glory, but in scattered tongues and a half-built tower abandoned on the plain. The Tower of Babel is one of those ancient tales that reaches far beyond its own time. On one level, it is a story about the origin of the world's many languages. To the ancient listener, it answered a real and puzzling question. Why, if all people are one human family, do we speak in so many different tongues? Why can a person from one land not understand a person from another? The story of Babel offered an answer, that once, long ago, we all spoke as one, and that our many languages are the echo of a moment when that unity was broken. And history does tell us that language is ancient, that it has always been diverse, that across the plains of Mesopotamia and beyond, many peoples and many tongues rose and mingled and separated over the long millennia. The land of Shinar itself was home, across its history, to many languages, Sumerian, Akkadian, and others, layered one upon another as empires rose and fell. The world of the ancient Near East was a world of many tongues meeting in one place, of trade and confusion, of translation and misunderstanding. The story of Babel captures something true about that world, that human beings, gathered in great cities, speaking many languages, have always struggled both to unite and to understand one another. But the story reaches deeper than language alone. At its heart, it is a story about human pride, about what happens when human beings, gifted with extraordinary power, turn that power entirely toward their own glory. The builders of Babel were not evil in any ordinary sense. They were ambitious. They were skilled. They were united. They could do remarkable things. And that is precisely what makes the story so enduring, because it speaks to something in every age. The temptation to build monuments to ourselves, to make a name for ourselves, to reach the heavens by our own power and on our own terms, to say to the world and to the sky, "Look what we can do. Look how high we have climbed. We need no one above us." And the story offers a quiet warning about that temptation. Not that ambition is evil, not that building is wrong, not that human achievement is to be despised, but that when all of it is turned only toward human glory, when the goal becomes making a name for ourselves rather than living well, when the tower becomes a monument to pride rather than a gift to the world, something essential is lost. The unity that could have built beautiful things becomes a unity turned toward emptiness, and it comes apart in confusion. There is even, hidden within the story, a kind of mercy. For God did not destroy the builders of Babel. He did not send fire or flood. He simply scattered them. And in scattering them, He sent them out to fill the earth, to become the many peoples and nations and languages of the world. What looked like a judgment was also a release. Humanity, freed from its single prideful project, spread out across the whole earth, and became the rich and varied family of peoples that fills the world to this day. There is one more thread in this story worth drawing out: the strange power of language itself. We rarely stop to think about what a miracle it is that we can understand one another at all. That sounds made in the mouth of one person can carry a thought into the mind of another. That words can build bridges between separate and hidden inner worlds. Language is perhaps the most human thing there is, the thing that lets us cooperate, imagine, plan, and build together the way no other creature can. It was language, more than anything, that made the tower possible. A united tongue meant united minds, united effort, united ambition. And so when the story tells us that the great unity of humanity came apart through the loss of shared language, it is pointing to something we still feel today. For even now, when we speak the same tongue, how often do we truly understand one another? How often do our words, meant to connect us, instead divide us? How often does a conversation dissolve into misunderstanding, into people talking past each other, into confusion that feels almost like a curse? The story of Babel names something deeply true about the human condition, that our ability to understand one another is precious and fragile and easily broken. That unity is hard to build and easy to lose, that the same tongues that can raise a tower can also in an instant fall into confusion. And yet, even in the scattering, there was a gift. For out of that confusion came the astonishing variety of human language and culture, the thousands of tongues, the countless peoples, the rich and beautiful diversity of the human family spread across the whole earth. What began as a judgment on pride became, in time, the many-colored tapestry of humanity. The scattering that ended the tower also filled the world. And so we leave the plain of Shinar tonight. The tower half built and abandoned, its brick and bitumen slowly weathering under the wide Mesopotamian sky. The people scattered in every direction, carrying their new and separate languages out into the world. The great city of Babel behind them, its name already becoming a byword for confusion, even as it would rise again, in later ages, to become mighty Babylon. Humanity was now spread across the earth, divided into many peoples and many tongues, filling the world as it had been meant to from the beginning. And out of all those scattered peoples, out of all those families spreading across the plains and mountains and river valleys of the ancient world, the story is about to do something it has not done before. It is about to narrow its gaze, to leave behind the great sweep of all humanity and to follow a single family, a single man. His name was Abram, a man from the city of Ur, in the very land of Shinar, where the tower had stood. And God was about to call him to leave everything he knew, and to journey toward a land he had never seen, and to become the beginning of something that would change the world. The story of Abraham and the journey that began it all, we will tell it together next time.